Alrighty, hope everyone's doing well. This is going to be the weekly outlook for May the 26th to the 30th. Um, some things to go over coming into this week. We did have some news over the weekend with Trump. He actually talked about the tariffs. We'll talk about that here in a second and how that impacted the market. We also do have NVDA earnings here in a bit. So first things first, let's talk about the key economic events coming into this week. This already passed, so we will talk about that here in a second. As for other red folder news events that we do have, we have some consumer confidence. That's going to be at 10 a.m. on Tuesday. We also have FOMC minutes this week. This is going to be on Wednesday. So Wednesday is going to be a fairly big day here with FOMC minutes along with NVIDIA earnings as well. We have Thursday GDP. That's going to be at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then on Friday, we have consumer sentiment along with the core PCE. So decent amount of red folder news events coming into this week. Major things that we do have is NVIDIA earnings. So this is going to be really key for the overall market, right? So NVIDIA, big mover. That we have big tech name. So this is really going to be super important coming into this week. We also have a couple other earnings names. We do have Costco, a few other ones here as well, but the major one that we're going to keep an eye out on is going to be NVIDIA on Wednesday after close. So let's go on to the tech names to see exactly what we're looking for coming into this week. So right now you can see that we're pulling back towards the gap fill on the higher time frames. What I like to see is the reaction that we have around your 5740. That is the area that we broke out from and the area that we reclaimed earlier in May. Moving forward, I like to see buyers stepping in off this area. So coming into the weekend, I had this chart marked out. What I really wanted to see here for the major indices. So first things first, we're on the ES as you can see here. Oops, let me get rid of this. The key levels that we had was your 5740. So this is really the area that we reclaimed back earlier from May, as you can see right here. Now we're using this general area as a potential retest for this continued pushback towards the upside. So if I turn back on this drawing tool, really it's going to be your 5740 here on the ES. As you can see, currently what we've had is some news over the weekend. So we had Trump, he talked about the tariffs over the weekend, pausing the EU tariffs until July the 9th. So in this case, we're having a little bit of a reaction so far coming into this week. We're going to have a gap up on the overall markets. What I would like to see for the ES moving forward is a reaction that we have off of your 5860. So your 5680 is going to be a key pivot point if we do want to see any sort of continued push back up and towards the upside here on the overall markets. We're also going to have to reclaim back above your 5920 if we want to see continuation. If we break underneath your 5860, we're just going to end up heading back down in towards, it's going to be your 5758 and potentially your gap fill that we've created all the way back down in towards your 5740. So coming into this week, we're just going to keep an eye out on your 5860 here for the ES. If we go on to the SPY chart, the key levels, in this case, I'm going to have to redraw my key levels out, but really on the daily chart, the levels that I have for the SPY is really all the way back down in towards your 568. So your 568 is your higher time frame point of interest. This is also the area that we broke out from, the area that we reclaimed. And then we also have this level marked out here as well, which is your 580, this gap that we've created. So we can draw this back over, drag it, go back onto a lower time frame. So in this case, this is basically our another key level, basically at the top of your gap for the SPY. So we have the bottom of the gap marked out, which is your 568. We have the top of the gap marked out, which is your 576. So far for the SPY, we're about to have a pretty big gap up coming into Tuesdays. What I would like to see now is the reaction that we have off of your 584. So we can draw this level. Sorry, I had all the levels removed, but in this case, it's going to be your 584 here for the SPY. If we can reclaim back above and hold back above your 584, we can see this push back up and towards, it's going to be this 590 towards the upside. If we break back underneath your 584 coming into Tuesday, we can see this push back in towards, it's going to be your 580 and potentially below, which is your 5 76. So those are the levels I have for the ES and the SPY. Let's go on to the QQQ. Thesis for this coming week. Coming into this week, what I like to see is the reaction off of the 2953. This is the first key level on the higher timeframes here. The next level will be the gap all the way back towards the 2250. I would like to see the buyers step up if along with the ES here as well. So if you go into the NQ chart, go into the daily chart, as we can see here, for the NQ has been stronger than the ES. If we go back onto the lower time frames, the key levels in this case that we do have marked out was your 2690, and we also have marked out here as well, which is going to be this key pivot point, which is your low that we created on last week's Thursday. So as you can see so far, if we're comparing the ES versus the NQ, you can see the NQ is relatively stronger than the ES. Now what I'd like to see is to really just maintain above your 20060 for this continue push back up and towards your 21500 and above here for the NQ. So that's what I have marked out for the NQ. If we go into the QQQ, the key levels in this case is going to be number one, it's going to be this 514. So we're about to reclaim your 514. Now what I like to see is to hold above your 514 for this push back up in towards your 518 and above. If we get underneath your 514, we're just going to see this push back down in towards the gap that we're going to create here over the weekend for the QQQ. Now let's go on to some of the tech names that we do have. First things first, let's talk about Tesla here. Thesis for this coming week. Right now, you can see that Tesla is basing above the 330 key level. So far, the market is dropping. You can see that Tesla is holding up. What I like to see moving forward is now the reaction that we have off of your 350. A break above the 350 will send us back towards the upside. If we break underneath 330, we can see a move back towards the downside. So in this case, if you go into Tesla, this one holding up compared to the overall markets. As you can see here, overall markets is holding up. Overall markets end up dropping on Friday. Tesla holding up compared to the overall market. So what I would like to see now, Tesla above your 350. If we can get above that 350, hold above your 350, we can see this nice push back towards the upside being that 360 and above. If we just stay inside the range, we're going to be ranging. But what I like to see, as I mentioned, above your 350 for this one. Let's go on to the next charts that we do have. NVIDIA earnings next week on this name. What I would like to see is the reaction that we have after earnings. If we can break above 136, we can see a move back towards the highs earlier from 2025. If earnings comes bad, we can see a break back underneath the 130 key level. So for NVIDIA, this one does have earnings next week on Wednesday after close. What I would like to see coming to next week is the reaction that we have off of your 130 along with this 136. So this is the area of consolidation that I do have on this name, right? Consolidation. Coming into Wednesday, I don't really expect too much of a move on Tuesday. I don't expect anything to happen on Wednesday either. So we'll just wait for an after earnings potential play on this one for a continued push back towards the highs or the lows, depending on how the earnings comes in. Now let's go on to the next chart. Apple showing weakness compared to the overall market. You can see that Apple, you can see that it was lagging and also had news last week dropping it towards the lows. What I would like to see now is a reaction off 193. This is the low of the range along with that 189. So for Apple, it's a really good area for potential longs based off the long term. So for Apple, we're back in towards the lows that we've created all the way back really from your 2021. So for Apple, higher time frames, at least long term, this one's looking good. Intraday wise, you can see it's been a little bit weaker compared to the overall markets. Multiple touches around this general area. For Apple, not really too much to talk about in this case. Key levels we're going to have is your 200 key psych along with this 193. If we break underneath 193, you can see this push higher. If we have that gap coming into the markets, we're going to want to see the reaction that we have off of your 200 key psych. If we reject off this level, we can see a push back towards the downside. If we can reclaim back above your 200, base above your 200, we can now see potentially a move back higher here for Apple. All right, AMD. thesis for this coming week right now, you can see that AMD is pushing towards the downside after getting back underneath the 116 the key level. Once we broke underneath the 116, the next level was 106. This is the top of the daily gap. I'd like to see if buyers step in off this level. If we want to see any upside, we'll have to now reclaim back above your 116. So for AMD, higher time frames, the key levels that we have, as you can see, is your 116. This was your previous area of support, turned into resistance, got above it, and you can see got back underneath, pushed towards the downside. So 116, very key for AMD. Any sort of continued push so far, you can see we're bouncing off this gap that we've created. I'd like to see now reclaim back above your 111 and then really back above your 115 for any sort of continued push right back towards upside here for this name. As for Meta having some reactions off the 660 key level, aligning with the overall markets. What I'd like to see is now the reaction off the top of the gap. If we could hold the gap fill and if we can hold the gap fill and the 2627, we can see some buyers step in. If we reject, we will fill the full gap towards the downside. So for Meta, as you can see here on the higher time frames, in this case, we have your 627 along with your 660 for Meta. If we break underneath, hold underneath, we're going to see this full gap fill. If we defend the gap, potentially we can see a little bit of a bigger pushback towards the highs. It's going to have to reclaim back above your 626 for any sort of continued push back towards the upside here. We'll see how it opens coming into Tuesday morning. As for Amazon, this one is inside the gap that we broke, that we created a few weeks ago. Once we broke back underneath the 206, we started pushing towards the low of the gap. The full gap is back down towards your 194 on the higher time frames. That is the next major level on the higher time frame. So for Amazon, if we go on to the daily chart, Amazon, the key level is your 206. As you can see, this is the top of the gap. This is the bottom of the gap so far. Once Amazon broke underneath your 206, basically using this as a retest back towards the downside. Now you can see pretty big drop coming into Friday. End up getting bought up. Now the key levels that we like to see is really the reaction that we have off 202. So we're going to have your 206, 202, and this 194. We'll see how this one opens up coming into Tuesday morning. Really for long sides, we like to see it back above your 206. If not, we can expect most pops to be shorted for this potential full gap fill towards the downside. So that's at least for the major names. We'll talk about some of these other names here as well coming into Tuesday morning. In the pre-market, a lot of these ones as well. We'll talk about this a little bit more in detail in the pre-market prep. So just a brief summary of what I'm looking for coming into this week. Major things is going to be NVDA earnings. Now with the Trump tariffs out of the way once again, that was fairly quickly. So we just kind of announced the EU potential tariffs, and then over the weekend, really just backtracked and then said July 9th. So just kind of back to normal. We're looking for those major dips to get bought up for the continued pushback towards the highs. But yeah, that's going to be it for me today. And I'll see you guys all tomorrow morning in the pre-market. All right, take care, everyone.